Okay, welcome to our show. I'm Dale. Okay, Mike, you're welcome to the show too.
And it's the land of make believe tonight.
It
Well,
is
we'll
that.
we'll be discussing the politics in the land of Oz.
Yes, and not just among politicians, but also among some of the general populace. First, we're going to start with a little story, another kind of make believe. It turns out, you may recall back several years ago, shook me up because I trusted the FBI's crime lab. I mean, this was supposed to be one of the bedrocks where you could trust them. Kind of like, I know some of you don't agree, kind of like for me anyway, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, perhaps, or the Washington Post, or maybe even the honesty of something like the Peace Corps. You know, where why would they lie to you? Why would the American Red Cross tell you a story? Well, this was the case with the crime lab at the FBI headquarters. Really, pretty important guys. Well, it turns out the Oregon State Police have a very similar thing with their crime lab. Uh-oh. Now, beyond it being, kind of shaking your faith in government, if you still have any, beyond that, it also affects thousands and thousands of cases where people were found guilty of certain things when, according to the guy that finally confessed, they made it up sometimes. Oh, no, that's not good. So the local equivalent of this is when it turns out that the guy that was making stuff up, sometimes about drug cases and sometimes on other things. And if they were doing it on drug cases, were they potentially doing it on other things? We don't know. It's kind of like catching the commissioners in a lie. Okay, we caught them on this. What else have they been lying about, right? Because they are lies, sometimes just flat out lies. Not making anything up, not exaggerating, just lies. Okay, we know this for sure, and we'll talk a little bit about that this evening. And so apparently now there's another person that's under great suspicion of having done the same thing. So our current district attorney, his name is Ryan Mulkins, okay? And he took over from the former DA, which was Stephen Campbell. And so my understanding is that the current district attorney asked the former DA, Stephen Campbell, could this have an effect on any of the cases which we have prosecuted? And the former DA said, oh, well, no. Now wait a minute. What do you mean? Oh, no, no. First of all, it doesn't seem credible to you that Stephen Campbell keeps lists of cases still, what, in his house?
Or that he could be able to answer a question like that off the top of his head.
What?
How the heck would I know? I would have to look at the specifics of each case and go, this either does or does not apply to it.
Now, the thing is, they're required now by law. They didn't do this out of the goodness of their heart to notify the lawyers for each of the cases that were touched by these crime lab guys, just the one they know of, and the second one is now under suspicion of doing exactly the same thing. They have to notify those lawyers that there may be a question about the conviction or most likely the plea bargain. Imagine that.
Wow.
Of all of those people. Now, obviously,
yeah, because what is it? I mean, it's a huge percentage. It's probably better than 90% of stuff gets plea bargained.
Plea bargain. Now, obviously, some of those people were guilty. Well, just the law of averages tells you that. But sure. We do know that there are times when it's kind of like somebody leaving their home because the home is underwater. You know what I mean? The money part of it's underwater. They're never going to get out. And so they just walk away. They just walk away from the debt. Well, how many times have people made that cost-benefit analysis for themselves and said, there's just no way that I can fight this. I don't have any evidence on my side. I know I was not guilty. And we find out occasionally, most of the time, okay, honestly, most of the time they probably did something. But some of the time they're plea bargaining and they didn't do anything.
Right. Oh, listen, that's not outside the realm of possibility at all. I have paid off on a civil case before because it's a pain in the ass. I mean, people will...
well, just because all those girls accused you doesn't mean you did it.
No, here's the truth, and you may not want to hear this, but anybody can sue you for anything, and then you're required to defend yourself against it. Now, knowing what I know now about the whole process, I would not have gotten an attorney. I would have defended myself, because that's what I ended up doing anyway. And I realize, they say, what is it? The guy who defends himself has a fool for a client.
Mm-hmm.
That may be, but I when it came to meeting with the other party, and it was what do they call that as a
well, they could call it a deposition, but you're talking about when they get together and meet both sides.
Both parties get together and you negotiate basically as to what the payoff is going to be, and ultimately. They were holding something big over my head. And what was the big thing that they were holding over my head? That it was going to cost me $15,000 just for an opening into court. And there was no gain for me in this whole thing.
Right.
So, I negotiated them down to where I knew that the complaining party wasn't getting anything. Only the attorney was getting paid. And I said, okay, that's good. I didn't like that. It was a joke. The whole thing was a joke. But the bottom line is that doesn't matter. There's a lot of people that get busted for criminal things where they do the exact same thing. Is listen, if you don't agree to go up the river on this charge, we're going to nail you with this charge, and you're going to be up there for the rest of your life.
Yeah, they do tell you that. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So it's and listen. I'm hoping, like you said, law of averages, they're getting more bad ones than good ones.
Well, Mr. Capone, you did, go ahead and give in to him on these charges. So,
yes, that's, it's one of these things where, and the whole thing was a big nightmare, but very, very telling. I'll tell you, and this is getting afield a little bit here, but when you enter into a lawsuit situation, you're most likely dealing with two attorneys in the same town who know each other, and they're calling each other up on the phone. They're probably having drinks after work. It behooves them to keep you talking to them and throwing paperwork back and forth for as long as possible.
That's how they make their money.
Yes. Every billable hour, it's like, let's have round one. Okay. We'll have a deposition and we'll do this and that and that and this and this and that. And then, oh, wait a minute. And I finally figured out when I was talking to my attorney on the phone, he would let me rattle on as long as I wanted to because the clock was running.
And there's a minimum. Some of our 2-hour minimum. You call them up, you get 5 minutes of, how's it going? Well, let me tell you. Okay, I got to go. 2 hours.
Yeah. No, it was a really bad thing, but a positive lesson to learn. And depending naturally, you would not defend yourself in every single case, but in this particular case, it was such a no-brainer situation. But they aren't always like that. And some might require detailed information about the law in order to get by. This was one of those things where they were just milking it as long as they possibly could.
Okay, so fitting in with our theme this evening, one of the things I did recently, and I've told you about this, is I wrote a letter to the editor. We're going to play back a little videotape. It's only 3 minutes. It sets the tone for the rest of the show. And so, Mike, since it sets the tone for the rest of the show, why don't you just go ahead and play it, bud?
Okay.
Oh, I can't hear it. No, still can't hear it.
Okay. Stand by a second here.
I've obviously got nothing to say, so.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm hearing it, and yet it's not going out. It's not returning to the system here. So why don't you yammer on for a minute, and I will look into this.
Let me yammer on so that I can yammer on some more. Look, the general idea is that we're going to lead into something that's recently happened to Sandy Casanelli. Now, Mike and I both kind of agree about Sandy that perhaps she's hanging on to something, and I am tonight too, for maybe a little bit too long. But the thing is, she's being treated unfairly. Look, there's another guy that we know, Mark Seligman. Mark may or may not be your favorite guy in the world, but when Mark asked the Daily Courier if he could write an opinion piece, I'm not talking about a letter to the editor, I'm talking about something that's quite a bit longer. It's his opinion on some subject, and it's longer. Kevin Wittison of the Daily Courier said that he could not write anything that was critical of the county commissioners. What? What? This is now the editorial policy of the Daily Courier, that you can write an opinion piece, your own opinion, but they won't allow you to write about the county commissioners? That's not right. So Sandy Casanelli, I wrote a letter to the editor, which I'm going to describe in this video, one can only hope. And in the video, I talked about some quotes that we exclusively have, that came from the court case where the city attorney, you've heard these already from us, and we played the video for you, where the city attorney was talking about what the city can do and can't do. For example, some people did not know, I didn't know this, that the city can impose a sales tax on you without your permission. The city can impose on all of you that live in Grants Pass City a property tax without even having you vote on it. They can't do that on a county level. And so I had some questions about that. Is the videotape ready?
Let's see here.
No, that videotape's not ready. I'm bored with that videotape. Let's not play it. Okay. So what I did is I wrote in a letter to the editor and I put in the quotes and I said, why aren't these quotes in the Daily Courier? They're pretty damning. They're pretty awful. Nobody knew these things. Why isn't this in the Courier? Well, Kevin Wittison of the Courier, the editor, decided to cut out the part questioning why it wasn't in the Courier, which is what I got up and said in front of the commissioners. What kind of newspaper cuts out criticism? It used to be that if you were writing a letter to the editor, that you might say, hey, I don't agree with your editorial policy, or what's up with this? Apparently not anymore. They're that sensitive, which is very strange because you don't need to work on that anymore, Mike. It's okay. Very strange because now the Courier is actually changing some of its attitudes about things. It's covering some of the same stories that we are that they weren't looking at before, like on social media, which Mike excels at. And they actually quoted me today in a news article. Here's what it says. These are the guys from County Fire. Okay, it actually says, it's a story about County Fire, which they haven't been covering. They wrote something about the wonderful new regulations, but they didn't talk about any of the controversy at all. We did, exclusively. And the guys at County Fire credit us, and so do the TV stations in Medford, with breaking that story. Well, they finally decided they're only behind us by about a week or two now, which is better. They're catching up. And they decided, and they said, but in a that they were unable to reach those guys. Yeah, I'm not surprised they were unable to reach those guys, because those guys out in Maryland said, we almost didn't talk with you. Oh, really? Why? Because we thought you were with the Courier. They didn't trust they would be treated fairly. So it says, the Daily Courier was unable to reach County Fire's chief, Dan Trader. Yeah, they wrote an article, but they didn't talk with the guy. Okay. Let's see. But in a recent interview on the website, badcounty.com, operated by Dale Matthews, there's no reference to Mike, of course, Trader said his company is being targeted. And then there's a quote from this guy, Dan Trader. And then a little later says, Trader said in the Matthews interview, see, Mike wasn't there. Yes, he was. Yes. That the blah, 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 blah. Okay, all stuff that we've already told you. Well, this is in the Courier. This is the very first time the Courier has ever referred to what we do as anything but a blog. A blog is a web log. A web log is like, Here's what I had for breakfast today, and Susie was mean to me, and I don't like that. That's a blog. What we're doing is news. And it's regarded by everybody but the Courier up until now, who's now quoting us, and
Nice.
the commissioners. They're the only ones who say, you're nothing, you're nothing. I'm telling you, you're nothing, you're nothing. Nobody watches you, nobody cares. 300,000 views, so what? You're probably making that up. And we're coming up on 300 straight days of the show.
So say again what day this was in the Courier? Was that today?
Yeah, today. So things are changing at the Courier, but not with Kevin Whittison. So here's what happened to Sandy Casanelli. So Sandy writes this thing, and Jim Moore, the infamous Jim Moore, he's leaving finally. He writes some article where it says, and it all depends on how you decide to write it. He says, and I'm reading from, I usually don't read from a piece of paper. Let's see. Former County Commissioner Sandy Casanelli, a frequent critic of the Board of Commissioners. Okay, she is former. And they always mention that she was recalled. Okay, and they said that also. A frequent critic. And she says, you know, to be fair, I'm also a frequent advocate for the people, especially when it comes to things like access to information. So is she a frequent critic or a frequent advocate? She's a little of both, but can you change it up every once in a while? I mean, really, do you have to call us bloggers? Really? Because it's kind of denigrating, and it's not really fair to always say she's a frequent critic. She's also a frequent advocate. It depends on your point of view, doesn't it? And so she said,
yes,
yeah, okay, sorry, Mike. I don't mean for this to be a monologue, although it's...
Oh, yes, it's certainly not. That could never happen on this show.
Yeah, sorry about that. But she says, you know, why didn't you ever write anything, this paraphrasing, why didn't you ever write anything about the fact that my recall had illegal parts in it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was there when we together, because I brought the camera, went to go see Art Harvey. And it says on the pieces of paper, each and every single recall sheet. This is not stupid and boring tiny details because it's important. On each one of them, it says at the bottom on the back that you are required by law to sign a thing saying that you are the petitioners. It says by law, you're required to sign it. Guess how many out of, I believe it was 676, how many were signed? The answer is 0.
0.
So she had an important question for Art Harvey. Do you remember the previous recall election that didn't work out so well for Bill Hunker and the guys who were going up against Cheryl Walker? Because up until that point, the number of people who were accepted as petitioners, as signing a petition sheet, were like this, okay, over the years. And then suddenly the number of people that were declined during that one single period went way up over the top. All these people were denied. And then right afterwards, it went right back down, and it's like down here again. There's this huge spike.
Were some of those denied for the exact same reason that they didn't use in Sandy's case?
Yes. Now, I got a postcard after that election alerting me, and I guess all voters, most voters, about that provision. And the provision is, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, if you don't vote in a couple of presidential elections, 2 of them, presidential elections, you think that you're still registered and you're not. What? Well, your name is there, but you're not really registered. Not really registered? What the heck is that? Well, nobody knew this. I didn't know it. I mean, we do a political show, and I had no idea that you could, and then people were saying, no, wait, I know that I'm registered. Well, you didn't vote in the last 2 elections. Well, now, wait a minute. I didn't know that. Well, you should know. Now, how the heck are you going to know that? So they sent out a postcard after the election. They could have done, look, what they do is they take in the, chokes me up, back to Pepsi. What they did, because that other was not very good. Just a second. I can do that. It's our show. What they did is they never look at all of the signatures. They just do a sampling. right? And so if they're going to do a sampling of a couple hundred of them, and it turns out that an inordinate number, I mean, it was way up over the top, suddenly looks as if it's not kosher, what you could do is you could contact those people. I mean, how much work would it be to contact those people? Under supervision, you could have volunteers do so and say, do you realize, oh no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. They wouldn't have signed it otherwise. I mean, there's always the people from out of town who are, I don't know, crazy or something, and they sign. But there were plenty of people who were absolutely, totally convinced. I'm convinced, aren't you? Well, you may not be on the list, or maybe they don't recognize your signature. Should they contact you? I don't recognize your signature. They're not going to bother. They have to know who you are, or it's not going to be accepted at all. So since they know who you are and they've got your telephone number, I think, but at least they have your address, they're not going to contact you for something important like this. Art Harvey decided no. Now, what happened with this guy was, I'm not going to mention again and again and again that he's up for re-election, is going to be counting his own votes. I won't say that. So stop it. I'm not going to say it. So this guy said in an open meeting with the commissioners, well, I'm not allowed to do certain things. Then I called the state and they said, yes, he is. Now, his supervisors should be us, but turns out that it's not, apparently. The state says, yes, he can. And he said in open session, no, I can't. Well, that's just not true. So then you've got to ask yourself, how trustworthy is this guy? And whether you think he's cheating on a daily basis or never, there's a problem with credibility, and I don't want an election guy that's got a problem with credibility, like the FBI crime lab or the OSP crime lab. I don't like that. That's not good. Okay, so she said it was illegal. They didn't do it correctly. So when we went down to talk with this guy, he said, well, if you have any complaints, you should just take it to the state. Kind of a cavalier attitude. But that's what he said. And she said, well, it's too late. And he said, well,
yeah.
I just brushed it off. Now, she was recalled. Now, whether you were happy she was recalled or kind of bummed out about the fact that she was recalled, it needs to be done correctly. And it wasn't.
And listen, even if they went through this process and it ended up that it was not done correctly, certainly there has to be accountability happening in that loop somewhere.
That's what this show is all about. That's what our show every night is all about accountability. And there are those who feel that that's exactly what we should do. Now, here's the response that she got from Kevin Whittison. Let's bring you back to Kevin Whittison of the Daily Courier. I've got to put these on, but I don't really need them. Okay, so what he said is, no, stop it. What he said is, and this is the email. If you really believe that, then file a lawsuit. The newspaper has neither the capability nor the duty to overrule the democratic election process. Sincerely, Kevin Whittison. What that meant was, besides that cavalier attitude, he's not going to print her letter to the editor.
Yeah. Well, I think that you would have a very hard time because, as we saw in the case of Judge Wolke, he's on board. Listen, whatever you guys want to do, you just tell me what I need to do to back you guys up. And that's what I'm about. That's the flavor that I got from him on this situation. So if you got into his courtroom with this particular case, I would imagine that you'd probably he'd redefine the meaning of, signature or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
That's right. No. What he said was that putting the word permanent in the headline of this ballot measure would be deceiving the people. But the word permanent is in the rest of the text.
Right. So he would find something, that didn't add up or that he could make not add up in your complaint, and it'd get dismissed or, and listen, certainly if you sued about this, the state ethics department would have to be weighing in somewhere along this timeline here, and I would imagine that they would just roll along with whatever the office there wanted to do. I mean, Art Harvey's he's a company man, so let's.
She took it to the state ethics guys.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to happen. These weren't signed. It says under penalty of law. And they weren't signed. And Art Harvey couldn't care less. It was obvious that he couldn't care less. Well, just take it to the state. And Kevin Whittison, well, just bring a lawsuit. That is not the solution. I mean, first you have the money to do a lawsuit. Oh, well, everybody knows you can get a pro bono lawyer. Oh, really? Are you going to get a pro bono carpenter? You're going to get a pro bono everything these days? I don't think so.
Here's an interesting thing. With somebody who is an ethical person, if you're the clerk there, and something doesn't add up, then it doesn't add up. But you're not going to change your mind about what adds up based on your own biases or what you want to have happen. Art Harvey probably didn't like Sandy. And I'm sure that there was a lot of entrenched people within county government rank and file that didn't like her because she's shaking up the system, doing something different. Hey, we need to have our status quo protected. So, so he doesn't go out of his way on the part of Sandy to throw those things. It's no big deal. Nobody ever signs those anyway.
It says under penalty of law. You have to sign here.
Okay, but then he, arbitrarily decides he's going to start enforcing that when it comes to Bill Hunker's petitions on Cheryl Walker. Now let's see. Let's take a look. The scales of justice. Oh wow. I wish I could say that I'm shocked about this kind of thing. It reminds me of what you would see. What we saw at the Republican Central Committee. It was a blowout election. Blowout. It was very clear that the direction that people wanted to go, and yet you still had these very loud whiners that were making a big stink. They were making a big stink. I mean, it was embarrassing. Where is your humility? If I had just got blown out in some election like that, I would go, okay, well, I guess it's not my day. Not these people. Oh, no, we are going to win. And if we're not going to win, we're going to cry about it. That reminds me of what's happening right now of these Islamic, people out of Syria. The Syrian refugees are coming into these other countries, and they're telling people, I don't like the way you're dressed. Stop drinking beer. Stop doing this. And they're assaulting people and doing all kinds of stuff like that. That's the same type of behavior. I mean, that's
in their host exaggerated. In the host countries?
In the host countries.
Oh, brother.
So it's a very, very similar situation where, listen, this is the framework. We all agree to the framework. You lost. Sit down.
Well, here's now the core of this. Okay, so that's Kevin Whittison and the Courier. What more did you expect? Okay, things are changing. They are listening. We are changing their course. That's one of the things that we do. We tell the news to the best of our ability, and we're going to talk about what that means. And then we also have opinions, mostly because I started off just telling the news, and lots of people said, thanks, but what does that mean? Well, there was nobody doing any analysis of it all, okay, which is what tonight is about. Pattern recognition, trying to analyze this. What does this mean in the overall view? So one of the things that happened with me was the value of videotape, this thing right here, okay? And so it started with me with Dave Toller, okay? Seemed like a decent guy to me. I was wrong, but he seemed that way. Okay, so Dave Toller, he says and does a couple of things which are wrong. I mean, he just said, I never did this, and it turns out that he did. And I said, well, that's on videotape, Dave. And he was one of those kind of people that say, so? And I said, but that means that, yes, you did do it. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. We had this with Simon Hare, too. Simon Hare had accused the former sheriff of padding the budget. And I said, you accused the former sheriff of padding the budget. No, I never did. Well, so what I did with Dave Toller is I brought one of these, and I brought the speakers, and I brought the this and the that. It was a bunch of stuff. It took me like 3 trips to get it in that little back room, and I was all set. And as soon as they said, yes, Mr. Matthews, I said, I would like to play this for you. And as soon as I started to play it, Dave Toller got up and left the room. Well, everybody already knew what was on there. It was the proof that Dave Toller had not told the truth. But he wouldn't even stay to listen to it. He just unceremoniously got up and left. Well, the same thing happened with Simon Hare. I came back to the next meeting, and I had, this little thing playing back. He cut the power rather than let anybody listen to it. He said it was disruptive because, it cuts into his credibility, I guess. Well, you think?
Yeah,
there's your Simon Hare.
This is why we need a full personality profile and a dossier on these people before you.
Oh, you're getting that now, buddy. You're getting it on me or getting it on Mike. Now, if we can all convince Mike the right thing to do to serve his country, then okay. Yes. So look, so here's the other thing that happened. You all remember, we've talked about this ad nauseum. I hope to do it one last time, and my hope is to let it go, because it's very much like Mike has pointed out to me in various ways that we've got a lot of people that love what we do. Hey, thanks for keeping track of them. There's a couple of people who like what we do because they hate government and we're giving it. Most of the people are like, hey, thanks for keeping track, you guys. Thanks for keeping track. It's very much like going to some family reunion and everybody's hugging you. And then every once in a while you got poke. Hey, what's that poke? Okay, and they're hugging you and they're kissing you and they love you and everything. And poke. Hey, what's that poke? And now somebody's injecting you with something with a needle and it seems like something's going, hey, what are you doing back there?
Don't be implanting ideas here.
Yeah. No, okay, yes, of course. You shouldn't be concentrating on the negative guys. But heaven help me, it's fascinating to me about these folks because what the heck are they thinking? And this happened with this case with Harry Mackin. Okay, so what had happened was there are several people who were members and were members then of the Republican Central Committee. And two of them came to me independently. I don't know if they knew each other, were going to say anything. To me, I'm not a Republican, but they came, and neither is Mike. They came to me and they said, you're not going to believe what happened at one of our Republican Central Committee meetings. This is what they told me. Now, we've since then had a third person in that Republican Central Committee who confirms that. Now, we've got one.
If you don't name those people right now, you're a liar.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what's been said. Now, look, Cheryl Walker tried this. I got up at a weekly business session and I started reading from the police report about Simon Hare and his drinking challenges. And it said in the police report they had talked with his friends that were there with him that night, and they confirmed that he was sloppy all over them and was going to drive, and they were stopping him from driving. He later on said, well, I doubt very much they'd say that. It's in the police report. Now, you can tell the police that you would doubt that. Feel free. I reported what was in the police report. Cheryl Walker said, you can't do that. Why not? Because you weren't there in the bar.
Yeah.
You can't report about that fire last night in Weimar because you weren't there. Yeah, I think that I can, especially if you've got footage or if you've got eyewitnesses.
Well, and you know what? Keith is doing a similar thing right now. I mean, he just started this up here a few weeks ago, where now all of a sudden, if that person's not here, you can't talk about him.
If they're not in the room.
He's clearly had some, outside legal boundary conversations with Cheryl Walker about, what's the right way to do this.
Now, the reason this comes up is just yesterday in the hallway, I'm talking with a couple of people. I mentioned this on last night's show. I'm talking with a couple of people who I don't know what their politics are. And they're saying, oh, you're here with the camera. And I start explaining what I'm doing. And JJ Schofield, the HR director, comes up. That's not true. That didn't happen. This was a year ago with Keith and this stupid thing that he said about county workers, that they're little moles that sneak around and do lesser services. And JJ, after a year, and supposedly, and one would only hope, at least looking at the tape. Now, you can always say, well, he probably didn't really mean that. And maybe he did, and maybe he didn't. I think maybe he did, but that's my personal opinion. But he did say it. No, JJ Schofield, the HR director, is saying he didn't say it.
Yeah. And, Dale, that's why I recommend that you get one of these things And then you can just look up very quickly that video on it and just hand the phone to the guy and say, hey, here you
You
go.
know what he would say.
No, I'm not talking about JJ Schofield. I'm
Oh,
talking about the guy he's telling that it was a lie
right.
to.
Well, here's the best part of this
JJ,
story.
you can't help him.
No,
He's
we're not going to be
already,
able to help him. No, we're not going to, can't help Diane Mackin either. Diane Mackin. Okay. Because, well, what happened with the guy was the guys that were with me, they don't know me. And they listened to what I said and they listened to him and they looked at him and said, we don't believe you. We believe him. Must have been the way I was telling the story. Okay. But it actually happens to be true. So what happened with Harry was we did have 2, and now we have 3. See, that's the way the news works. You depend on sources. When you can't be there, then if you only have 1, because we do have 1 on several stories, but we generally don't tell you those stories. We might say, well, here's a little conjecture. Okay, but we don't quote things. The Courier could learn a lesson from this unless you have 2 sources. Now, we had started with 2, now we have 3. When we had 2 people who were sitting just a few feet from Harry Mackin said, here's what happened. They took a vote. And it doesn't really matter what the vote was about, but it happened to be about taking a stand on an issue. And as I recall, it was about the levy. And the Republican Central Committee was voting whether they should take a stand or not. And there are always people who say we shouldn't take a stand at all, not ever. Okay, I guess. I don't know. Where's their guts? And they're a party, right? It's like the Democrats saying we're not going to run anybody in this county. That's how I got introduced to the Democrat Party when I moved.
Well, here, let me ask you something before you could continue. This the Central Committee vote that you and I both attended was about that.
Yeah, but this was about
the one was about it too.
No, this was about an earlier one.
Oh, an earlier. Okay. Oh, okay.
So what happened was they decided to take a vote. Well, there were people in the room, I was told by 2 witnesses, they didn't want to take any vote at all. Well, was it because they thought they were going to lose? Maybe. I don't know. Okay. I asked, but I couldn't get an answer to that. All right, I'm fine with that. But after the vote was taken, there were a couple of hopping mad people. My understanding is that one of them was someone I can't mention because I have only 1 source for that. But the other one was Harry Mackin. I have 2 sources. Didn't like it. And then there was a threat centered around Harry Mackin. Listen to how I'm saying this. There was a threat centered around Harry Mackin about potentially closing down the Republican headquarters, which is now owned by the Robinson family. This problem has gone away, buddy. It's potentially closing it down because he didn't like the results of the vote. I have no problem telling you that because I now have 3 sources for that story. Now,
so was there also a threat at that time that they were going to find some way of defunding the rent? In other words, the venue would go away because there was no money to fund it.
And it's an ideal location right across from the county commissioner's office.
Yeah, it is.
Wonderful location. Okay. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, socialist, whatever you are. It's a wonderful location. So there was a threat. Now, the thing that bothered me about that, besides the fact that I was mystified that 2 members of the Republican Central Committee would tell me the story, I quoted them. I went to the weekly business session and I said, I think I said something very similar to, I don't know for sure, but here's what I was told by 2 sources in the Republican Central Committee. It's now been joined by a 3rd who bravely stepped up and said something after the first 2 said that. And of course, immediately, well, who are they? What are their names? I'm not going to give you their names. What are you, crazy? But you got to know who they are because how many members of the Republican Central Committee were there that day? Right. Okay. Right. Harry Mackin knows who they are. He has to know who they are. Come on now. And so he said, well, I never said that. Okay. He didn't say it to my face. He was telling other people that. And I went to him and I said, now, Harry, if you don't like that, first of all, you should say it to my face. And second, he wasn't there that day. And second, you already know who said it. Why don't you talk with them? I'm quoting them. Okay. Well, I was told afterwards when a member of his family just jumped all over me. Oh boy, now you got Diane Mackin all worked up, and she is well known, according to that person. I don't know for sure. This is conjecture, only 1 source. Conjecture, only 1 source. Well, she'll do that anytime anyone complains about Harry Mackin. And so now you're in for it forever. Well,
Listen,
that to be the case.
admirable,
Yes.
loyalty there.
Support from the family. Yes, that's a wonderful thing. And that's part of what America is founded on. The other thing it's founded on is a free and fair election. If you lose it, well, then don't lose it. I mean, don't go crazy. Just better luck next time.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, there are two other situations which are close enough to this situation to lend credence to that in my mind. I didn't have the sources. I don't know who these people are.
Right.
Those are
But
Dale's private sources.
tell us about who the others were. Well, the reason they're my private sources is I did that before Mike and I were working together on this project. Okay.
Well,
so tell us the other two situations, please.
Okay. The one situation that I was not there, this was Bill Hunker and Joseph Rice did a presentation.
They were invited.
Yes, admittedly anti-levy, and they were hassled essentially all the way through, or most of the way through, this presentation by people objecting to it, and
by three main people.
Right, and
Connie Roach, the county assessor.
Mm-hmm.
Keith Traherne was my understanding,
and Harry Mackin.
And I think that Roy Lindsay might have been involved in that, but we know he's involved in the third thing because we were there. Go ahead.
Right, that's right. And then the third one is the Republican Central Committee vote, where they were voting on whether or not to take a stand for or against the levy. And in this case, it was a yay or nay to be against the levy, and it was a blowout. It was a complete blowout. And so, as a counter to the presentation by Bill Hunker and Joseph Rice, there's Harry Mackin and was it Roy Lindsay doing it with him?
I believe that it was
somebody was doing it with
4
him.
people all together,
Right.
but Harry's the one that immediately comes to mind.
Yeah,
didn't like the presentation and was trying to make them be quiet, although they were invited to do a presentation.
Yeah,
and the Central Committee went in that direction. Now, there's just a certain amount of fairness in our world that I insist upon. We do in this show. And whether you think that they're smart or dumb for opposing something, once you've taken the vote, similar to what's happened with GMO and similar to what's happened with a lot of other things, or marijuana, okay? I don't smoke marijuana, but once the vote's taken, you have to have some respect, in my opinion, for the people who voted.
Yeah, and listen, I will tell you right now, I didn't vote for the GMO ban.
Okay.
I really don't support that position at all. I really don't. However, we had an election, and my side lost, and that's the law right now. And you have the same kind of hissy fitters that are stopping the enacting of this legislation right now. I mean, these are the same type of people. It's the same type of reaction to something, and you're having the same thing on a city level with the marijuana legislation.
That's correct.
They're kicking and screaming and throwing a hissy fit. Well, you know what? You lost. Maybe you should have run a little bit better campaign. And something.
This is America. I mean, we're tough.
Yes.
And all right, for example, in social media, which is assuming more importance for a lot of people, including the couriers now watching over, we get this guy, this character named I'm using the right word, named Danny Shirley. Okay. Used to be Dan Shirley. Now he's Danny Shirley, whatever. Okay. And he says, well, about this thing where they were there and they were disputing the vote and all this, the third time when we were there personally, I'm paraphrasing. I want those people, you should gather all these people here, right here, so that we can quiz them about what happened and what they did and how they did it and what in the world. Danny Shirley, you go, let's put you in charge of going and finding those people and bring them all right in front of you so they can explain to one person what was that really happened. We were there. There's lots of eyewitnesses. Okay. We wanted to videotape, but they wouldn't let us. In fact, they said, well, you can. And then they said, well, maybe you can't. Was it a good decision on their part?
Yeah,
I mean, this is like watching sausages made or a bill, man. It was terrible. It was so embarrassing for them. The number of people that was embarrassing. It was embarrassing because of these people I mean, one guy said, well, we didn't win this vote. I'm going home. You're going home? Really? I'm taking my ball with me. Oh, come on. So better luck next time. You lost, so get over it.
Hey, listen, my candidates almost always lose, so I'm used to that sort of feeling, and so yeah, get used to it, and buck up. There's another day.
And then this guy is saying, "Bring him here in front of me. I've got questions for him." You know what?
Yeah, and that is a paraphrase because that isn't exactly what he said.
No, it's not exactly what he said, but
it is the general. I mean, he was basically, deposing you and wanting to depose them on exactly what happened, and name, rank, and serial number on all these people.
Where are you sitting? How was the wind blowing that day?
Yeah, and then why don't you go talk to the Courier and have them,
or at least cover the story. The Courier didn't even report the Republican Central Committee took a vote, and neither did Cajo. And I called both of them, and I said, they took a vote. Oh, we're not interested in that story. It's the biggest political party in the area. You're not going to report on the stand that they took on this important issue?
Listen, well, I think that is illustrative of their understanding of politics in this area. And that is that if you ruffle any feathers, if those feathers become the head feathers on the block, they are going to make life difficult for you.
Yes.
This is how politics works. So don't cover politics.
Well, this is what Dan Mancuso said. No, I don't have everything recorded. Dan Mancuso, the editor of the IV News. I know what you said, Dan. And Dan told me that sometimes, I said, but it was something else. And I said, but this is a story. Well, I'm not going to cover that. And I said, why are you not going to do a story about that? Well, I agree it's a story, but my advertisers might not like it. Now, Dan, you did say that. You did say it. Now, I don't have audio recording of it because I'm not going to record it secretly. I just don't do that. Even if it's okay by state law, which I'm not sure that it is, but even if it is, I'm not going to do that. And I can't record everything everywhere I go. Although maybe a county commissioner should, with the big button saying, I'm recording. I don't know. But in full transparency, you need to understand how the basic rules of journalism work. You get two sources. Sometimes you can identify both of them. They're happy to step up. And then there are other times where you can't. I went to a meeting of the Grants Pass Chamber of Commerce, and the guy that was in charge at the time said something about the previous council members, the ones that were recalled, and he said, it reminds me of the rise of Nazi Germany. He meant about what they were doing. Mm-hmm. Well, I mentioned this. Well, that never happened. There were 100 people there. You think any one of them would step forward and said, yeah, the guy really did say that. That's not too good an idea. I know what was said, but all those people at this meeting of the Grants Pass Chamber of Commerce, not one of them had the guts to step forward and say, yeah, that really wasn't very smart. Or don't even say that. Just say, yeah, I agree with them. Or they are like Nazis or whatever, but no one would back me up. I don't need any backing up. I know what I heard. No guts.
Well, I think the thing to take away from this, and really this comes down to Diane Mackin. And Diane, do you really think that we would go to this great length to continue to have a story if any element of the story was not true? I mean, what would the point of that be, to continue harping a lie over and over? That doesn't make any sense at all, and ultimately leads you to some repercussion down the road if you're caught in it. So why don't you take it up with the rest of the people who are in that room? I'm sure your dad can tell you who they are, and take it up with them. I mean, really, and listen, you know what keeps this in the news? You keep talking about it, and that's why we're talking about it right now. So it's up to you. You're the one flipping the switches here.
And it happened yesterday with J.J. Schofield about this thing. Keith Eck never said that. Now, you've seen the tape. You haven't seen the tape from the Republican Central Committee because there's no tape. Okay. But we told you what happened, or at least we told you what they said. And you haven't seen the tape of what Simon Hare actually did in that bar, but you got the police report, okay? And so this is what they interviewed, and we reported what they said, okay? So the thing is, that's one of the things that you do in news, okay? And so when you've got somebody like this Mark Goins videotape, which you've seen, of Mark Goins equating people that question government with devil worshippers, Satan worshippers. He meant it. He said it. It was on the slide. There were witnesses. There's videotape. They made the videotape. We didn't make the videotape.
Yeah, we
and you
took
got a
their
guy
video.
that was verbally assaulting me at a meeting. He never said that. I was there. What can you do for somebody like that? Of course he said it.
Yeah, and listen, I have a feeling that this incessant questioning of you to find out who these people are, so then she can just turn the revenge focus to them. You know,
you think? Yeah.
Yes, and you know, and I'm sure that those people are not really looking forward to that sort of thing. And
they could step forward. They could. I was the one. I'm backing up Dale Matthews is fighting for, you know, the free and fair democratic process, Republican process, of taking a vote. Well, yeah, I'm stepping. Well, they don't want to do so. Okay, God bless them. They don't want to do so. I have no problems doing it. This is what they said.
The point is that this sort of procedure is protected in this country. You know, there's all kinds of people that have listen. There have been people from newspapers that have gone to jail to protect their sources. They've been, you know, ordered by judges to you know, say who their sources were. Those are obviously very high profile situations where, you know, real crimes took place, and they never give up their sources, and you know, I guess they spent a little time in jail or whatever, and they come out the other side and usually end up being vindicated or whatever. But
now, Mike, just a second. You know me,
yeah,
and the viewers know me, okay? Because we're talking about I was the only one who reported that at the time. What do you think I would do if Judge Wolke ordered me to reveal those sources by name?
Well, first of all, there would have to be some sort of a premise where he was requiring you to do that for some reason.
What do you think my reaction would be?
I would imagine that you would probably, you know, take it to the floor.
Absolutely. Okay, now that's never going to happen, so it's easy for me to say. But you know who I am and what I do. And many of you appreciate it. And I'm going to try to concentrate on you and not on the people that keep poking me with things. On us, okay, both of us. J.J. Schofield was mentioning both of us. Okay, I'm fine with that. And I'm especially fine that Mike's getting poked. But the thing is that there's nothing behind any of this. You can't say that Keith, remember when Keith was lecturing us from the dais, when he's saying, well, I'm going to clear this room because you're pretending like, you know, the county commissioner had something to do with starting off with initiating this levy. Well, we've seen the tape. You've seen the tape. Everybody in that room knows. And I guess he figures, I don't know what he's thinking. He figures if he keeps denying it, that's the equivalent of the truth, and it's just simply not.
Well, I think in his mind, I mean, he interprets those occurrences differently than you do. He doesn't think that was him initiating the levy. But I mean, it's clear that, hey, let's have so-and-so in here so that we can investigate how a levy would work on this sort of a situation. Well, what is that lane?
Yeah, he's the liaison to that guy. I mean, it's starting with Keith.
Right. And what is that laying the groundwork for?
Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
And even easier is
then why are you even doing it?
You got Keith saying this thing. And then he writes out a letter to all department heads saying, please swear that I never said it. And then you've got him saying it. There was nobody that came to his defense.
And listen, I'll be the first to say that was the stupidest thing in the world. It had the stupidest thing about that whole thing was not what he said.
No,
it's that when Dale got up and said something about it, he was poking him, that he reacted and said, I never did that. you edited the tape or whatever. And it's like, you know how the cover up is always worse than the crime.
Yes.
This, it was stupid. He could have just said, well, that was dumb. I shouldn't have
Yeah,
said that.
that would
I
make
didn't mean
no
it like that.
okay.
And that would have been it. But no. And there was no crime that took place here. The
No,
only thing
but
that
this
took
is what
place
J.J. Schofield was saying just yesterday, that it didn't
yeah,
happen.
I know. But here, hang on a second. Let me finish.
Yeah.
That whole situation had nothing to do with little moles that sneak around. Look at him. He's belittling it had nothing to do with that. This was exposing this person's character. This was exposing the fact that, when he could have just excused it by saying, wow, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have said that. Instead, he lied and said, these people are framing me. They are fabricating evidence to make me look like an idiot. That's what was going on there.
That's why I started off with the Oregon State Police crime lab. Fabricating evidence.
So, you have experience fabricating evidence. I see.
Oh, no.
Maybe it is a fake.
Well, then you were involved, buddy.
Yes, okay, I know. And now I'm guilty.
He forgot all about the fact the county records this stuff too. What a luckhead. So Mike takes the two recording and put them side by side. Well, I would have thought that would be it for Keith Eck. How can he keep his head up in public? How can he walk on a sunny day without having his head down?
Okay, so how can people, once they've lost, a blowout vote, it was like 80-20.
That's right.
On this thing. And how can they continue to gripe and moan and yell loudly, oh, this is not fair. How can they continue doing that in that situation?
Those guys
have the same
Central Committee that we went to, they said nobody understands this vote. Nobody understands this vote. Everybody is confused. Everybody's confused.
Right. 80% of the people, they didn't understand what they were voting for. But no, this is the thing. It's hubris. These people have incredibly huge huevos, and they're just
but they're all twisted huevos.
Yeah, they're all they're scrambled huevos. It's a bizarre thing. Yeah, just because you have the chutzpah to do something doesn't necessarily mean that you're right about it. Doesn't even necessarily mean you're a good person, although I'm not casting any aspersion on anybody.
Yeah, it's also a fundamental misunderstanding of what is the news. You do the best that you can. You base it on sources. And you report what the sources say rather than from your own personal experience. And if you do have personal experience, then you can relate that. But most of the time, the news that you see anywhere, and you've got plenty of people out there who don't trust the news at all, either it's all made up or whatever. I wouldn't believe everything I even see. Of course not. But what we're trying to do is bring you the news from sources, from the police report, OSP notwithstanding, and from like the sheriff says, well, those figures are myths. Well, as it turns out, the Oregon State Police, the idea of them putting in more time for us and us running the wheels off their car, well, finally, after the election, they said, well, no, that's not true. Well, now, Sheriff, why did you say that Bill Hunker was making this stuff up? It's just simply not true. So we're going to continue trying to bring that to you. I will do what I can to not be fascinated by these crazy people. I mean, they're crazy. They really are. I mean, they're just crazy. And there's no time. This is not the end of this. They're going to keep bringing it up over and over and over again. I don't want to spend a lot more time on this, but I intend to remember today's date, which is September 24th. And then when the next thing comes up, or the 18th iteration of this from Diane Mackin, public figure, what I plan on doing is saying, would you please look at September 24th, and you will see what I hope will be the last explanation of what journalism is, how you try to do what you can, and when you make a mistake, like I did yesterday, you admit it, unlike the Courier. I said that there was going to be a meeting today where J.J. Schofield was going to bring forward 7 things about paying more money, hiring more people. As it turns out, one of those looks like it might end up with a patrol deputy. We're not quite sure, okay? But it looks like it might. and a couple others are changes in the designations of IT workers, you know, the little moles that sneak around, do lesser services, changes that could end up with them being paid more, but probably not immediately. I have no problem saying we guess what we can from the listing, just a plain old vanilla list of what's going to happen. And then when we find out more information, we tell you about it. That's what you're supposed to do. Not cover up the news, Jim Moore for the Daily Courier, but cover the news. We will do what we can. And when we're wrong, especially when Mike is, I'll tell you. And when we're right, I'll reiterate that we are right. Mike?
Yeah.